Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. Nikola Tesla. Now, in my last video I uploaded, I put up a quick response or rant to the so-called announcement that quote-unquote Einstein was right, as supposedly gravitational waves were detected 1 billion years ago, 1 billion light years away. The propaganda machine and media matrix in full force as they flooded the headlines with this so-called announcement.
After decades searching, finally, gravitational waves. And if you're wondering what that means for you, consider this. Till now, we've been deaf to the sounds of the universe.
Einstein described gravity as the fabric of space-time. He predicted that the collision of two massive objects would cause gravitational waves that would spread like ripples in a pond across the universe.
From what I can gather, we've always assumed that this theory was right. We've just never had the proof.
This Einstein's theory of general relativity has been sort of assumed to be correct, and there's been many confirmations of it until now. And this is one more piece of the puzzle saying, 100 years ago, Einstein was right about all this stuff, which to me is really amazing testament to, the genius of Albert Einstein.
Yeah, that's kind of baffling, where he kind of 100 years ago, he's like, yeah, I think this is probably right, but who knows? And now we actually have the tech to prove, nailed it, that he was right. No big deal.
It's being called the breakthrough of the century. Today, scientists confirm that gravitational waves do exist. Albert Einstein first explained them in his general theory of relativity a century ago.
So using math, he argued that the waves are ripples in space and time, and they're created by two black holes colliding.
Yeah, this is a really great discovery, and it's a great discovery because, number one, Einstein predicted this 100 years ago, so he knew through the mathematical work that he was doing that we should be able to see the signature, the gravitation signature of enormous, very active events in the universe. Even back then he knew this. Now, what he also knew was that these signals caused by the interaction of very massive objects would be very weak, so we'd need a very sensitive detector. And what we've learned today is that the detector that has been built is sensitive enough to actually detect these very subtle waves of these activities happening between massive objects elsewhere in the universe.
How was Einstein so smart? Why is there only one Einstein?
He didn't see it as a simple pull like the Earth pulling down on an apple that falls out of a tree the way Newton did. He saw it as space itself curving. So I have a model of Einstein's universe here, a solid bowl and a t-shirt, and when space is empty, it's flat. But if you put something really massive in it, like a star, say our sun, it makes an indentation. It makes a gravity well. And actually the Earth and all the other planets are rolling around on this gravity well. That's why we're falling towards it. We're going downhill. Well, if you have two objects, not just one star, but two or two black holes, they make a really deep gravity well. And if they're spinning around each other really fast, and then eventually they hit and they form a new black hole, a bigger one, they cause a lot of ripples here. They make this surface vibrate. And it's those vibrations of space and time that ripple out across the universe and that we see here on Earth. What's different about this, Peter, is that it's not like a light beam going through space. It's space itself shuddering.
So the way I like to think about it, our universe is totally awash with these gravitational waves. We've known they're there for the last 100 years. Einstein predicted them, and he's right about everything, so they kind of had to be there. And now, for the first time, we've actually detected them. Einstein predicted them, and he's right about everything. Einstein predicted them, and he's right about everything. Einstein predicted them, and he's right about everything.
Oh my galaxy! We found gravitational waves! Ah! Wow, just wow, guys. So much incredible science happening right now in our lifetime. Einstein would be so proud.
What is it about Einstein? Why is he the most famous and best loved smart person ever? We love Einstein because he's been proven right so many times. However, there's one last incredible prediction that has never been directly observed: gravitational waves.
So for those unaware, what we are witnessing here is the continued perpetuation of a paradigm that the power structure will do whatever in their power to maintain and reinforce. After all, it benefits them and only them. The bottom line truth is we are not taught real science in our education system, which is in line with organizations such as NASA, which is why they ram Einstein and his theories down our throats and portray him as our scientific god, while at the same time completely ignoring Nikola Tesla. Today, everything is based on unprovable theory, based on unprovable theory, based on CGI animations, based on hearsay, based on theory. A billion years ago, a billion light years away, who in their right mind would take such nonsense seriously? Think about how you were never really taught about Tesla in school. We were never taught real science. That is the bottom line. Because if we were, we would know the true nature of reality and the true forces and subtleties of the universe that the ancients themselves were well aware of and utilized to accomplish great wonders, that today the so-called scientific establishment cannot even understand, let alone replicate. Again, one must realize the public education system, institutionalized education, is nothing more than an insidious agenda by the criminal global control that has been implemented to condition and brainwash a population of mindless cogs in a machine that simply does what it's told and regurgitates information. It is specifically designed to produce a mind that would never question the status quo or establishment. So what is being educated then? Being educated is educating yourself, having the ability to critically think for yourself, to be able to question authority. You cannot be educated by the same system that perpetuates a dumbed-down paradigm that's specifically designed to keep the elite of this world in control.
Yes, we're taught how to read and write and to perform some basic math, but we aren't taught how to think for ourselves. We aren't taught the principles of logic or how to question an ideology. What we are taught is how to sit at a desk and listen obediently as the world is packaged into a neat little box that we are to accept without question. We're taught to regurgitate that information for test, to give the answer that those in authority demand. But most of all, we're conditioned to conform. And the reward for faithfully jumping through all of these hoops for 13 years is a worthless piece of paper that no employer even asked to see. Kids exit high school barely qualified to flip burgers at McDonald's. And even for that, they have to be trained. 13 years is a long time. That's most of our childhood. To have this much time taken by force with such pathetic results is unacceptable. The problem here isn't a lack of funding. The problem here isn't poorly trained teachers, lax regulations, or low-quality curriculum. The problem is our entire educational paradigm. The system isn't designed to prepare children for the real world. It's designed to format their minds and condition them for a life of subservience. It's designed to create a population of individuals just smart enough to fill out paperwork and punch a time card, but too stupid to question the system itself or the authority of those running it. If we want to change course, we cannot ignore this aspect of our enslavement. There's no point laboring to wake up other adults in our lives if we send our children to be programmed by the state. The revolution of the mind must include a revolution in education.
A look at the pyramids, of course, and other megalithic sites around the world that defy all logic and explanation is a prime example. Evidence seems to suggest the ancients knew how to manipulate matter utilizing electromagnetism and resonators in conjunction with the earth. Take Edward Leeds Scanlon, for example. As legend has it, he defied gravity utilizing Earth's magnetic field. A scrawny mere 100-pound man that constructed an entire castle all by himself, Coral Castle, of course, in Homestead, Florida. Considered one of the great wonders and mysteries of the world. To this day, it has not been debunked or explained adequately. And isn't it interesting his work was based on magnetism? Isn't it interesting he claimed to have discovered the secrets of the pyramid builders? J.P. Morgan and the top of the pyramid have kept the true knowledge to themselves and continue to promote proven frauds and perpetuate a fraudulent paradigm. Gravity, at least how we've been told, does not exist. At the very least, based on current independent scientific research, which the mainstream scientific establishment has done their very best to ignore and sweep under the rug, while demonizing by attaching labels such as pseudo or fringe science, evidence seems to indicate at the very least, gravity may very well be an electromagnetic phenomenon. There are now many more credible theories as to what gravity really is. But what is certain is the current independent consensus is gravity is absolutely not what we have been told. This, many independent researchers agree on, including top proponents of the proposed electric universe model.
What is gravity?
We have no idea. Okay, next question.
Wow.
No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. We can say what it does to other things. We can we can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know.
So did I accidentally ask a deeper question than I meant to?
Yeah, no, you were meant.
If you ask yourself the pertinent questions, the entire scam will begin to unravel in your mind, such as why are we still using 1940s technology and supposedly sending rockets into space based on blueprints we received from Nazi scientists for rocket propulsion when Tesla was giving speeches over 100 years ago telling the world how to evolve from that. We have a new iPhone, an upgraded piece of tech every year that leaves the average consumer dazzled and amazed, yet we supposedly went to the moon 6 times in 4 years with 60s Nazi technology, never to return again by the way, and Wernher von Braun's Saturn V rocket, which we still have apparently not evolved from, or so the powers that be would love to have us believe. Unfortunately, the average citizen never ponders these pertinent and logical questions because they've been specifically programmed and trained not to. Let's recap. The concept of the so-called force of gravity was originally conceived by Isaac Newton. He proposed that every particle of mass in the universe attracts every other particle with a force proportioned with the product of both masses, that this force is also inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the masses. However, Newton's theory of gravity required information to be communicated between particles at a speed faster than light. This is because the force of gravity was hypothesized to act instantaneously, regardless of distance. While the intensity of gravity does decline with distance, it is still instantaneously felt, according to Newton's theory alone. This posed a problem for Albert Einstein as it violated the theory of special relativity. The speed of light is supposedly the fastest speed in which information can travel, and thus violates the theory. Thus, Einstein devised a mathematically complex theory known as general relativity. In essence, Einstein invented an entirely new dimension and state of matter. He proposed the existence of a fabric of space-time, which can become warped by the presence of matter and its respective mass. This space-time fabric can also act upon matter and influence it. Hence, objects with heavy mass distort the surface of space-time fabric, and orbiting objects simply follow the curves of the fabric that are distorted by the presence of those objects. Gravity is thus a distortion of the space-time fabric. The mainstream scientific establishment then used general relativity to further invent hypothetical phenomena, such as black holes. Isaac Newton did not claim to explain the mechanisms of the force of gravity. He simply described what he saw the force doing with varying masses and distances. A lot of conjecture has since followed with respect to what gravity is.
Einstein proved right again after 100 years. From an electric universe perspective, the irony is quite telling, since it shows the Einstein bandwagon careening off into a black hole of its own creation. Phys.org.com says, "For the first time, scientists have observed ripples in the fabric of space-time called gravitational waves, arriving at Earth from a cataclysmic event in the distant universe. This confirms a major prediction of Albert Einstein's 1915 general theory of relativity and opens an unprecedented new window to the cosmos." Once again, we see science journalists thirst for sensational headlines, with academics feeding a media frenzy. Some would call this more a theory of funding, not gravitational waves, but gravy waves. The more sensational the headlines, the more news media attention and funding potential. Unfortunately, as a result, the public can no longer distinguish science from its opposite, pseudoscience. There is no fearless investigative journalist to ask the awkward questions like, how in real terms does matter tell space and time how to curve? What does it mean to curve time when it has no physical dimension or direction? The word space simply signifies locations in 3 dimensions. So how can you weave a fabric of space-time out of non-physical concepts? The language is meaningless, used to impress rather than inform, and the scientists remain unaccountable to the tax-paying public. Some incredibly detailed claims are made to the effect that the signal originated in the last fraction of a second before the fusion of 2 black holes somewhere in the southern sky. It is said, based on computer modelling, that the black holes joined about 1.3 billion years ago, and their mass was 29 and 36 times greater than the Sun. None of these claims can be substantiated. A mathematical computer model is not real evidence for those claims. It isn't science. The image of Einstein, the embodiment of genius, in front of a blackboard where he had just scrawled R sub ik equals 0 says it all. The heart of the issue here is that Einstein didn't explain gravity. As many scientists are beginning to acknowledge, a new paradigm is now required by the sheer force of discovery. Looking back on his life at age 70, Einstein gave a clear evaluation of what he believed were his accomplishments, and I quote, "You can imagine that I look back on my life's work with calm satisfaction, but from nearby it looks quite different. There is not a single concept of which I am convinced that it will stand firm, and I feel uncertain whether I am in general on the right track." This confession, in a personal letter to Professor Solovine dated 28th of March 1949, was not made public until many years after Einstein's passing. But rather than inspire critical thinking, today's worship of Einstein creates an unresolved enigma. Two philosophically incompatible views of physics, quantum mechanics and relativity, standing side by side in scientific lectures as if such a horrific contradiction can be profitably overlooked. Einstein will continue to be proved right for another 100 years, because when all of the standards of physics, the observer and the observed, are relative and arbitrary, the theory is unfalsifiable. It's not science. Simplicity is the key to the electric universe. And perhaps a little humility wouldn't hurt either. Why not simply admit that we've hardly begun to solve the great mysteries of the universe and of our own real place in it?